I had this idea. Well, the first thing is that I didn't want to duplicate what was already being well done on the right. But one of the things, there were a couple of things that I saw missing. One was addressing the culture that the left had infiltrated and subverted. I picked 3 areas where the left had made their major gains. One was public broadcasting, another was education, and the third was Hollywood. That's how I began thinking. You know, where does the right need some force? And the second was I saw that conservatives are, as I often say, way too decent for politics. Don't like politics. Conservatives don't like politics. Don't like, getting into the down and dirty street fighting that politics is about. Don't like conflict. Just a basic conservative disposition. As a friend of mine once said, he said, we are the creators and they are destroyers. And that's a big difference. Conservatives are builders of businesses. They don't want to alienate customers or potential partners. They want to minimize conflict. Democrats, don't call them liberals, but even progressives is bad, but progressives, leftists, they live to fight. I actually think, I can't remember the context, but Michael Kinsley once said they live to bother other people. Bother thy, oh no, of course it was Terrell. Bother thy neighbor is there. So, when I looked at Hollywood, I saw that the left is very effective at calling people names, succeeding in embarrassing them, putting them on the defensive. It's the way they drive our people out of the field and the way they keep our people from being aggressive. So my first idea, this is actually how I actually launched what I called in those days the Center for the Study of Popular Culture, which is now the Horowitz Freedom Center. The first idea I had was, I wanted, Hollywood is not that big a community, and there, I was living in LA. I'm going to put out a publication to embarrass Hollywood leftists with their idiocies and just try to blow them back and do investigative reporting on them, expose the hypocrisies of their lives. Flying around in gas guzzling, it's obvious what Hollywood does. And I was going to call it Hollywood Eye. And I wrote to, and when I was beginning, I didn't have all you wonderful people. Now we have actually 100,000 individuals who support the center, which is what makes us strong. If you're dependent on one donor, or if you're dependent on a foundation or two, you're vulnerable. Because, and particularly among conservatives, although I've had wonderful conservatives, some of them sitting here, who have disagreed with me on somewhat big issues and have stood by the center. So I'm very grateful for that, Sandy. But in those days, there were the 3 foundations. Now, Olin, being good conservatives, they sunsetted themselves. Can you imagine one of these left-wing foundations like Ford saying, we're going to go out of business because, that's the proper thing to do. Anyway, so I wrote to the 3 foundations and I raised, they sent me collectively $100,000. And then I got the $100,000 and I should have done this before, but I'm kind of an impulsive person. And when I thought through actually doing this, I realized $100,000 will not do the job. I could not put out the kind of publication, distribute it, hire the reporters, and so forth. I bring up this story and then I went on and I did something like this with public broadcasting, which was much more successful. Well, I won't go into what happened there, but we caused quite a bit of commotion and trouble in public broadcasting. Lo and behold now, 25 years later, actually this year, Ben Shapiro, who I have known and worked with actually when he was writing his first book when he was, 12? No, I think he was 18. So we've known each other. He looks like he's 19, I know, but he's actually 29. So we've worked together for a long time. And he came to me with this idea, or we came to him and he came to us, for well, of course, when I started the center, the internet there was no internet, or if there was, nobody was on it except NASA people or something, I don't know. It's an internet site called truthrevolt.org. I'm going to actually let him tell you about it. And one of the things, people read my books, and my later books are kind of memoirs, and I talk about age and everything, and they're always saying, when you're gone, David, how is the center going to operate? Because we fill a very important niche. I mean, conservatives are actually somewhat changing. The younger generation is very, very different. Andrew Breitbart, whom I had an influence on, is part of the younger conservative generations who went to school and to college and were harassed and abused by leftists. Learn from them how to harass and abuse leftists. And Andrew was a prime example of that. In your face. I mean, that was one of the things, that was a phrase we used to have in the left, and I was always preaching it to conservatives. But again, if you're too well bred and your disposition, you look and you're happy that somebody's doing it on our side, but you're not going to you can't do it yourself. You just can't do it. So now we have a younger generation, and Jeremy Boring is another one, and they actually were influenced by Andrew. And so I'm very happy. You've seen, we've had a couple of panels with the younger people that we now have in our orbit. So I actually as I've gotten older, very much relaxed, because I used to feel like I've got to find some conservatives so that get them going in this war. And now I can sit back and watch these young people do it. And I'm going to, like with Ben, I mean, I had him in one of our Wednesday morning clubs, and I felt like I'm watching myself talk up there. He's got exactly the jujitsu that the center is about, the fight fire with fire, the in your face, call them aggressive conservatives. It's a kind of an contradiction in terms, but that's what they are. And so I'm going to leave the platform here now to Ben, and he'll introduce Jeremy.
I'm sure everybody in the room knows who Alec Baldwin is. He's the star of such classics as that horrible movie with Diane Keaton that came out recently, and that other horrible movie with Meryl Streep that came out recently, and also The Hunt for October when he was skinny. He's also the fellow who's known for, back in the 1990s, saying this during the Clinton impeachment hearings: if we were in another country, we would stone Henry Hyde to death, we would go to their homes and kill their wives and their children, we would kill their families. Alec Baldwin is also the actor known for saying that, well, he has Republican friends, although not those, quote, hypocritical evangelicals too lazy to raise their own children property, and or anyone who listens to Rush Limbaugh. By contrast, he thinks that President Obama is, quote, thoughtful, sincere, and realistic. He is also a perfect candidate for an MSNBC show, which is why he has an MSNBC show, or rather did until we got rid of him. On Thursday, a great gift fell into our lap. That gift was that Alec Baldwin was confronted by somebody in the paparazzi. Alec Baldwin doesn't like folks in the paparazzi. And he started chasing this member of the paparazzi, this photographer, around the streets of New York. And the guy was holding the camera, he was filming the entire time. And after chasing this photographer around for a while, Alec Baldwin proceeded to turn away from him and called him words that rhyme with clock-sucking flag. Well, we immediately sprang into action. This is our favorite thing. Our favorite thing is when the left violates its own standards. So what we did is we immediately went to the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, and we asked them to denounce Alec Baldwin. They gave us a rather tepid statement, and so we bashed them for not being stronger against the homophobe Alec Baldwin. We then went to the parents and families of lesbians and gays and asked them to condemn Alec Baldwin, which they did. We then went to Dan Savage, the supposed anti-bullying expert, the head of the It Gets Better project and the Vasco da Gama of bodily orifices. Dan Savage is a sex columnist who has bullied evangelical Christian kids in the past. He's also famous for licking doorknobs to try and give Gary Bauer the flu in 2000, posing as one of his interns, and is now considered somewhat of a gay spokesperson. Dan Savage actually came out and said openly that it was fine with him if people used the words clock-sucking flag so long as they were same-sex marriage advocates. So we got him on record saying that. We also opened a petition on the website. Within 6 hours, we had over 1,000 signatures on the petition for MSNBC to dump Alec Baldwin, and within 48 hours, MSNBC had in fact suspended Alec Baldwin from duty. He says that he may never come back. We only hope that he does so that we can bash him around some more. And to talk about kind of how we do this technically and how we motivate people, how we get people out, how we allow people to fight, because that's really what we're about. We're about the fight. I want to turn to Jeremy Boring, who's the managing editor of the website. He's also a Hollywood insider, so he kind of knows the ins and outs that happen there. So Jeremy, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. So David says that conservatives are way too decent to get in the fight. And I think that's why I picked Ben and I.
We're indecent.
We're indecent, at best. Ben and I first started speaking to David and Mike over at the center 3 or 4 years ago because we were so impressed by the fact that they're the only guys in the space who seem interested in taking scalps. And that's the business we want to be in. You know, the play nice, point out people's problems routine doesn't work. We have 1 million websites on the right that report on things that happen on the left, but that's where it begins and that's where it ends. Nothing's ever done with all of that wonderful reporting. We wanted to do something a little bit more intense. We wanted to sort of be an answer to Media Matters. What they do, obviously, on the left is they target the advertisers and the supporters of people on the right, and they do it incredibly effectively. You know, they've probably cut into people like Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck into their revenue streams by 50%, 75%. They've taken most of the money out of the conservative space by basically saying that it's indecent and improper for major advertisers to spend their money with racist, warmongers, homophobes, greedy people full with women, binders full of women. And as a result, you go over to MSNBC, and you would be the only person, of course, there if you did. But you would notice that giant national advertisers like Cadillac and the Bayer Corporation and Pepsi, they're all able to advertise on MSNBC. You go over to Fox News and you see Gold Bond medicated powder. As Ben likes to see, you see Pat Boone selling walk-in showers. You know, I mean, we have more than 2 times their ratings and none of their advertising base, and it's because they've made it toxic for national advertisers to actually go where the audience is, which is Fox News and conservative talk radio. And there's an appetite on the right that finds that very distasteful. You know, people on the right don't want to target advertisers. They don't want to target supporters, and it's because fundamentally we believe in that little document called the Constitution that grants people or preserves for people the right to freedom of speech. But there's a problem, And the problem is that when our free speech can't find funding, our free speech itself is in peril. And so Ben and I sort of constructed a little theory, and we call it mutually assured destruction. And we say that the only thing worse than using distasteful means is allowing your adversaries to use distasteful means without fear of retaliation. You know, mutually assured destruction has kept the peace between the major world powers for over 60 years. We all talk about it as though it's this really terrible thing, but when's the last time there was a world war? Well, you have mutually assured destruction to thank for that. If the Americans had said in the middle of the 50s and 60s, it'd be okay if the Soviets nuke a few of our cities and storm a few of our beachheads, because we're too decent to use this military that we've created, well, we'd be in the same place that the right is today in the media and in the culture. So it's our intention to do something about that. And that's what we're doing with Truth Revolt. We want to be sort of the insurgent tip of the spear for the right. We want to punch people in the nose. And we want to do it starting with the media because that's the low-hanging fruit, but we don't want to stop with the media. As David said, one of his initial passions was for Hollywood. And Ben and I, both living in Los Angeles, and I work for a Hollywood conservative organization there. We believe in the sort of axiom of Andrew Breitbart that politics is downstream of culture. And one of the problems is that everyone on the right who has an interest in culture, people like Ben, myself, David, and Andrew Klavan, who was here earlier in the week, we all find ourselves being continually drawn to politics. And that's because we want to do something immediately, and we feel this urgency to make some sort of difference. But the real fight is a cultural fight. And, as far as the long-term vision for what we're doing at Truth Revolt, we want to move ultimately beyond just the media. And we want to produce content that's taking these same ideas and the same fight and framing it in entertainment. Because ultimately that's 2 million people watch Fox News and 20 million people watch American Idol. People turn on their TV and their radio to get entertainment. So, there's websites out there on the left that are doing this, websites like BuzzFeed. Ultimately, we need to move into space like that. But we also understand that we have to score victories, build a strong foundation before we can sort of take those kinds of chances. So far, we've been able to do that. We had 90,000 unique visitors to the website just on Friday alone, the first day of the Restoration Weekend. We've gotten 20,000 people to sign up for the mailing list in the last 6 weeks. We have an activist team called the Truth Revolt Special Ops, which is 1,000 people who've volunteered to give us 3 minutes a day, every day, to actually contribute to the fight. And we like to turn these people loose on the left. For example, as soon as Alec Baldwin made his remarks, we had 1,000 people calling Capital One. You'll probably remember Alec Baldwin does commercials for Capital One. So they got 1,000 emails the first day and 1,000 phone calls the second day asking them if they believe that it's appropriate to refer to homosexuals as clock-sucking faggots. Really, it could be so many things that rhyme. I actually don't even remember what he actually said. Yeah. So that's kind of what we're working on. We're trying to build an actual movement of conservatives who have the David Horowitz battle tank mentality and help to make them operational. We want to activate the right in a way and weaponize this grassroots that we've seen growing up around the Tea Party. So that's what we've been focused on, and so far had a few good victories.
Yeah, I mean, the real motivating factor in all of this for us is that this is a war. And this is something that I learned from David, from reading David, from knowing David for a really long time. It's something I learned from Andrew Breitbart, who I knew since I was 17 years old. And that is that this is a war. And the people who are fighting, I mean, David says it the best that I've heard it articulated in the Go to the Heart pamphlet, which everybody should read, when he says, because Democrats regard politics as war conducted by other means, they seek to demonize and destroy their opponents as the enemies of progress, of social justice, and minority rights. Republicans can only counter these attacks by turning the Democrats' guns around, by exposing them as the enforcers of injustice, particularly to minorities and the poor, the exploiters of society's vulnerable, and the reactionary proponents of policies that have proven bankrupt and destructive all over the world. That's who these people are. They're evil. They are fighting for something that is evil. That means that it is our job to stick the knife in as deeply as possible between the ribs while smiling. There are no Marcus of Queensberry rules here. There are too many people on our side of the aisle who are upset with us. There was an article in the Daily Caller that said that what we were doing was really nasty and uncouth. How dare we go after the left with these tactics? There are Tea Partiers even who have said this, to which I say, I wonder if they remember what the actual Tea Party constituted as in when we went on a boat and threw tea overboard. Okay, that was more than just calling a sponsor. That was burning the sponsor down. The fact is this: no quarter is going to be given by the left in this war. We should not ask for it. It's not coming. We can live in a fantasy world. We can live in a fantasy world with unicorns and rainbows where President Obama is not president, where the left is not vile, where the left is not interested in destroying everything we stand for, where we can live our lives and they'll leave us alone. It's not true. They're not going to leave us alone. They're going to come after everything that we stand for, everything that we own, everything that we believe in. And unless we are willing to do what's necessary to take them out, then they are going to win. And the great barrier in this for the left has been the media. The reason we're going after the media first is because the media is the perpetuator of the big lie. It is the media that has been protecting the American people from the facts about the left for so long. Because it's not enough for folks just to stand up and shout the truth, which we do routinely at the center. It's not just enough for people on the right to say things that are real. Because it'll never even reach the American people. The media is not interested in reaching the American people. The media is a motivated force on behalf of the left. The media is not just innocent and ignorant. That's not what they are. They routinely lie about the facts. Lie. They cover things up. They do it in order to twist the message. I mean, everybody down here will remember the Trayvon Martin case. As a perfect example of exactly what the media was doing. The media first trotted out the lie that George Zimmerman was a white man who had shot in a black guy. George Zimmerman is Hispanic. Then they came up with the term white Hispanic, which has never been used, considering that the corollary in the black community would be that President Obama is a white black. They then came up with the lie that George Zimmerman on the 911 call had actually given the race of Trayvon Martin as the rationale for following him. They sliced and diced the tape. NBC News did that. They're now in the midst of a lawsuit about that. The ABC News then proceeded to trot out a badly pixelated photo of George Zimmerman, which showed a no gash on his head and said that he was not wounded. Then, of course, we got the pixelated photo, and he had a huge gash on his head and a broken nose. We had CNN and Jeffrey Toobin, their legal analyst who knows less about law than Barack Obama knows about governance. Jeffrey Toobin actually went on TV and said that George Zimmerman had in the 911 call used the racial slur coon, which has not been used in the United States since the 1930s. And beyond that, he said it was cold. He said it was cold outside. The bottom line is this: the narrative that was created was the narrative that President Obama wanted. The narrative was that if he had a son, it would have looked like Trayvon Martin. The narrative was that America is still a deeply racist place in which white men routinely stalk and kill black young men. That was the narrative that the media wanted because they wanted their story. And it didn't matter whose life had to get ruined. It didn't matter that George Zimmerman and his entire family had to go into hiding. It didn't matter that when Spike Lee was tweeting out the home address of somebody who was not George Zimmerman's parents, they ended up having to move. None of that mattered to the left because they're liars, and they're habitual liars, and they're liars about everything ranging from social stories like that to Benghazi, which of course was the great lie, one of the great lies of our time. The media was not just complicit in it, the media was pushing it forward, up to and including Candy Crowley lying on national television during a televised debate and saying that President Obama had said that Benghazi was a terrorist attack. He never said that. She later admitted that same night that he never said that. But Candy Crowley, like Scooby-Doo eating a Scooby snack out of the hand of President Obama, as soon as he said, "Please say it again," she immediately piped up and settled the lie again. This is what the media does. You remember when they were trying to pass Obamacare and the media came out and said, "Look at all these racist Tea Partiers." You had a bunch of Congress people walking out from the Congress, and they said, "Oh, the Tea Party was using the N-word against us." And Andrew Breitbart promptly put out a notice saying, "We'll throw up $100,000 for anybody who can provide any tape of anybody using the N-word at that rally." And of course, the media never reported that. They immediately said, well, of course the Tea Party is racist. The media are the folks who, in order to label the Tea Party racist, took a picture of a Tea Partier carrying a gun and said, "This is the racist Tea Partier," and they sliced off the guy's head and hand. Okay, it was a black man carrying a gun. This is what the media does, and this is the battle that we fight. So the bottom line is that we have to do to them what they've been doing to us for a very long time. We have to destroy their profit margin. We have to destroy their profitability. We have to destroy their sponsors, and we have to destroy their security in the knowledge that they can say whatever the hell they want to say without any sort of consequence. And so that's what we've been busily doing, whether it's Alec Baldwin or whether there was a case at the Los Angeles Jewish Journal in which there was a cartoon that was run with a picture of a Tea Partier as a jihadist, wearing the full-out jihad regalia, suicide vest on during the government shutdown. We immediately sent out an email to our team. Over 1,000 emails were received by this particular editor. He started getting calls from local advertisers, upset at him for running it because all of our people were inundating the advertisers with calls. He retracted it, and then he wrote a nice piece about us because he was scared of us. CNBC's Steve Weissman, who's a lefty commentator on CNBC, he dislikes Ted Cruz and he disliked the government shutdown. So he showed a picture of Ted Cruz on the television, and then he said, let's get some Mexican music for Ted Cruz. We immediately clipped that, and we put it up, and Matt Drudge linked it. And within 24 hours, he had apologized, the network had apologized for it. That's the kind of stuff that we do. Politico ran a piece in which they called for the death of John Boehner and they called for the death of Ted Cruz. We immediately went to Carbonite, which was the online sponsor of that piece, and we got Carbonite to back off of Politico. We did all of this in the first 5 weeks. If you've seen the young guys on laptops who are, hanging out while these panels are going around, that's us. That's the work that we're doing while everything is going on, because the battle never stops. Again, there's some people who don't want to fight this battle. There are some people who would rather write white papers for heritage. That's fine. We need all of that. We do need all of that. But there are people who have to do the dirty work. There's somebody who has to take the damn hill. And if we're going to be the people who take the hill, fine. Let the movement take credit for it. Let the movement live off the back of our successes. We don't care. All we care about is victory. All that matters is winning. And the only thing that matters in winning is taking some scalps and throwing a scare into them and making them afraid to tell the lies that they have been telling for so long. They are bullies. Everything that David says in his pamphlet is true. Everything David has been saying for the last 30 years is true. These folks are bullies. Their entire intent in life is to have a feeling of unearned moral superiority because they're better than everybody in this room. And for too long, we've been trying to talk with the bully. He's been telling us that if we don't give him the lunch money, he's going to punch us in the face. And we've been saying, let's have a conversation about that. You seem like a nice fellow. And as we've learned from our president himself, to quote President Obama, there is only one way to fight a bully, and that is you punch back twice as hard. Thanks so much.
That's right.
This looks to me like an audience of hockey fans. No, hockey is the model. They're the players, who have the great shots, who have the skill sets, who are wonderful skaters. And then there are the bruisers. They have designated hitters on every hockey team. And if the other team abuses one of the skilled players, the elite players, these bruisers come out and beat the crap out of them. And the fans cheer. So it's very important. If you remember the Clinton administration, Clinton was never the angry attacker. And to this extent, Republican consultants are right. A presidential candidate should be presidential, cannot get down and give shot for shot. But he had Carville and Begala, and then he had, I can't remember, but he would have had in the congressional ranks what I call designated hitters. And that's hugely important. The intimidation that goes on, it's very, very real. People do not want to be called names. One of the things that the left has done is liberated a generation of young conservatives by calling them names. Once you're called names enough times, it can't hurt you anymore. So I have so many scars on my back and all over that it's really difficult for them to get at me, and certainly it's impossible for them to get me not to say what I'm going to say. And this is what's happened to a lot of our young people in college, people who are at 18 and 19. I mean, it's really terrible what goes on in many classrooms. And on the campus with these leftist groups. Nobody wants to be called a racist or a homophobe or whatever. But when you're called that enough times for very innocent reasons, you disagree with them on the weather, racist, you become immune to that. And I've never asked anybody to do what they don't feel comfortable doing, because they won't be able to do it well, and I wouldn't want to put anybody. And I understand that a lot of my support has come from people who do not want to do this themselves, and they're actually quite wise. I was brought up in a household where we had arguments, political arguments, at the breakfast table, lunch, dinner, from the time I was very, very young. So I was born to that. It never occurred to me that there's a better way, which is avoiding such conflicts. So people often say, "Oh, you're very brave, David." No, I'm not. I mean, that's the way I was brought up, and that's the way I am. And I didn't think about the consequences of it till it was way too late to do anything about it. I've said this before, but there was a moment when it took me about 7 or 8 years to leave the left, because it is a religion. It gives you all the consolation that a religion does, gives meaning to your life, purpose. So it was very, very hard to leave, and then it was harder still to become a conservative of all things. I mean, the devils themselves. And I also had a real fear, because I had 4 kids and lived in Berkeley, and the Panthers, the Panthers had murdered my friend, and if I said something, I was going to, I put my family in danger. But there came a moment in 1985, the spring. Peter Collier and I had written a bestseller. It was actually the #1 bestseller on the Kennedys. And I got called by the editor of the Washington Post Sunday magazine and to pick my brain, and he wanted to do a story about Joe Kennedy Jr., who was a congressman. And he said, "What are you guys up to?" And I said, "You're not going to believe this, but Peter and I just voted for Ronald Reagan." And we actually hadn't consulted each other. Oh, he said, that's a good story. Why don't you write it for us? So we wrote a piece that we called "Better Ron Than Red." And they changed it to "Lefties for Reagan," but it was the front cover of the Washington Post magazine. And Peter said, when that appeared, Peter said, "Our literary careers are over." What are you talking about? Peter was the realist in our partnership. And he was exactly right. That was the last time we ever had a front page decent treatment in the New York. In fact, I'm a visible person. I've written 15 books since then. They don't get well, anyway. So they take no prisoners. But just to show you, I mean, it didn't even occur to me until the horse was out of the barn door was closed, the horse was gone. So, I've lived with that, and it's, made a relatively happy life out of it. But normal people, will hesitate wisely before making the kind of enemies that you have to make. So we need a strike force, and this is our strike force. That's what we're about.
David, you mentioned the colleges, and we're starting to work with Jeff Weiner to go out to the colleges, not just to reach out to them, but to train strike forces at these different colleges, because we need, I mean, we're relatively lean operation. When I say relatively, I mean massively lean operation. And so
what he means is that when the left set out to create a vicious smear site, Media Matters, they had a fundraiser in Washington with Hillary and Bill Clinton and George Soros. And they raised $8.5 million a year budget. Now, I've been doing this for 25 years. Our budget is about $6.5 million. That's how difficult it is to do that. An $8.5 million budget and 27 writers on staff to go after conservatives. And if you know, you've seen O'Reilly talk about it. They picked on every conservative or even not so conservative figure whom they feel is effective and therefore a threat. So we have one staffer, which is Ben, and everybody else is either, it's just the budget that we have is either part-time or volunteer. But you can see, I mean, I've learned, I had to learn I was never cut out to, I never ran a company. I mean, I ran Ramparts, left wing. But I've learned that you invest in personnel. It's the individual that does it. It's the only way to do it. That's what you invest in. So Ben, I've known Ben for all these years, and so I had very great confidence. When he came to me with an idea, I can't, navigate all the social media and do all these things that these young people can do. But I had the confidence I'm going to give him his head, and so it's working out very well. And we're going to just try to put a bigger floor under him. Yeah. Would you like to ask Jeremy and Ben some questions?
Thanks for all you do. I'd like to ask you to comment on Republicans who, like Senator McCain and others, have criticized their more conservative counterparts who are also duly elected. And then there are Republicans, and not just the known establishment, but good solid Republicans that are, as to put it your way, are a little bit scared of engaging in the bare-knuckled fight. How do you, what's your advice on engaging with them? Because there are Republicans that fear that an internal internecine warfare will destroy the party and deliver us Hillary, which is a real fear, but at the same time, I'm with you. You either come to the fight or you go home. So I'd like to comment.
I wish that Republicans would fight the Democrats the way they fight other Republicans. I think, to me, it's the strength and also the weakness of the conservative movement. For me, it was liberating to come out of the left. We always have to look over your shoulder at other leftists to make sure that you haven't crossed the politically correct line. Because if you do, you pay a huge price. Whereas conservatives disagree about everything. And that's a strength, but it's also a weakness when it comes to these kind of fights. So I'm hoping, I actually think that the country is in such dire straits, and that everyone who's a conservative understands that, that this is not going to blow it for us. I firmly believe that. Ben?
Well, our philosophy at Truth Revolt is to enforce a rigid ideological purity. The problem is that Ben's an Orthodox Jew, I'm an evangelical pastor. We don't agree on anything. So, in the meantime, we're just going to focus on punching the left in the mouth.
Well, my view has always also been that when it comes to there's this, unfortunately, I think, enervating idea, as opposed to energizing idea, an enervating idea in the conservative movement that once we vote, that's basically the end of what we're supposed to do. And so once John McCain is in there, there's nothing we can do about it except we can try to primary him next time, or if Lindsey Graham does something bad, we can try to primary him next time. I don't believe that. I believe the Milton Friedman admonition that it's not about electing the right people, it's about getting the wrong people to do the right things. And so what we should be focused on is it's okay to pressure people on our own side. I mean, we killed amnesty because we called people up and we killed amnesty. If we get a House Select Committee on Benghazi, it's going to be because the American people rise up and tell the House that we need a Select Committee on Benghazi. The pressure that we bring to bear, the power is in this room. The power isn't in the rooms in Washington, D.C. They're subject to us, and that subjection does not end when we leave the ballot box in November. There's a lot of time in between. This is not a situation, unfortunately, I wish it could be like this, where we could just delegate our powers, go home, they'd leave us alone for the next couple of years, and everything would go okay. But we need to hold them accountable, and so that's one of the things that we're in the business of doing, holding them accountable and removing the media middleman who lies to prevent us from holding them accountable.
I just loved the way you went after Al Sharpton and enjoyed writing a letter to the sponsors telling them how I would sadly forego having Philadelphia cream cheese and Triscuits, but this was totally necessary because I live in New York and have been watching the charlatan of Sharpton for years.
Yeah.
Was there any response?
Well, the corporations keep silent. Last I checked, I haven't seen any Ritz Crackers commercial on Sharpton in a while. We went after Ritz Crackers because for a couple of reasons. One, they are supposedly a family-friendly company, and second, because we desperately wanted to use the headline "Sharpton's Crackers" when we first launched the website. And so for those who don't know, the first campaign that we launched at Truth Revolt was a campaign against the advertisers on Al Sharpton, because even the left should be ashamed of having somebody like Al Sharpton in a position of power, although not ashamed enough to keep him out of the White House repeatedly from visiting President Obama. Not only is he a charlatan, he's responsible for deaths. This is somebody who was intimately connected with what happened at Freddy's Fashion Mart when 7 or 8 people were killed. This is somebody who, we had articles on the site where we went to the brother of Yankel Rosenbaum, the guy who was murdered in the 1991 Crown Heights riots. We had him write a piece for us. We went to Stephen Pagones, the DA who was slandered by Al Sharpton in the Tawana Brawley case, had him write a piece for us. All of these got linked at Drudge, so it was great for traffic, but beyond that, it also reminds people that the kinds of people who are employed on MSNBC are people who call Laura Ingraham a talk slut like Ed Schultz, people who say things like clock-sucking flag like Alec Baldwin, people who, our current campaign is going against Martin Bashir. We're going to start this tomorrow. Martin Bashir, for those who missed it, on Friday night, Martin Bashir went after Sarah Palin because Sarah Palin had compared slavery to Obamacare, because she had said that Obamacare was essentially a form of slavery because it was enslavement to the federal government. And Martin Bashir promptly went out and read from the diary of a slave owner in Jamaica, in which the slave owner had forced one slave to urinate and defecate in the mouth of another slave. And Martin Bashir then said, if somebody were deserving of that treatment, it would be Sarah Palin. Except he didn't use the words urinate and defecate, he used the words piss and shit. Right, so our next campaign is going to be to get Martin Bashir knocked off the air, because that is nonsense. Yeah. There have to be consequences for this. There must be consequences for this. Media Matters has been built up. What we're watching right now, the Benghazi debate, it's all about Media Matters. On October 16th, Media Matters released an ebook titled The Benghazi Hoax. It was by the heads of Media Matters. Media Matters was a Hillary Clinton project. It is a Hillary Clinton attack machine. She said it herself, that she was building the attack machine. And they were doing it for 2016. These are the folks that we have to take out. So what's wonderful about what we do is that we get up every morning and we don't have to search for targets very hard. There's Media Matters and there's J Street. We'd love to go after J Street. When we talk about our college programs, we're not just talking about activating students so that they know what to say in the classroom and out. We're talking about, we want students in their classes taping their professors and getting us the tapes of those professors so that we can have a Ward Churchill every week. Because, by the way, that would be a dramatic, if there were a Ward Churchill every week, that would basically only take out the poli-sci department at UCLA. So for us, it's all about the war. It's all about the battle. Al Sharpton is one target in that battle. But the American people also have to know who these villains are. And unfortunately, so many on the right are afraid to call out the members of the media. You know, when I did Piers Morgan and I told him that he was standing on the graves of the children of Sandy Hook to push his gun control routine, when I did that to Piers, that was something that was new. People hadn't done that before. David knows how to do that, but they won't have David on because they knew David knew how to do that. So they had me on because they didn't know who I was yet. And then I did that and they won't have me on anymore. But this is the folks on the right who go on George Stephanopoulos and don't say to George Stephanopoulos right off the bat, look, George, you are in the Clinton war room, you are a White House hack, and for you to pretend objectivity is nonsense and say that publicly. The fact that they don't do that means that we have to do it. It means that we have to do it. And you know what? That's okay. That's okay. As David was saying, not everybody's cut out for this. But there's enough anger in the country right now, and justified anger, not wild rage, justified anger, justified righteous indignation at what is going on in this country, that I don't think that we're going to have any trouble recruiting folks to help us with the fight.
What's the best way to feed you intelligence? We're all out in the field, we hear things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for instance, I had a friend who was an NBC investigative reporter, and ownership changed hands, and they came in and they eliminated 200 and some investigative reporters, cutting them down to 85. She doesn't know how she ended up in the thing, but her name was Cohen, and I think they thought she was a liberal. And but she said they were told they don't need that many investigative reporters anymore. They were going to be told what was the news.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I mean, there's no question that there's a tremendously high level of coordination between this particular White House and its favored members of the mainstream media. Media Matters was having weekly calls at one point with the White House to help message out to the MSNBCs and the CNNs. There's a high level of coordination. In terms of how you can give us information, you know, Andrew Breitbart was fond of saying that anybody with a cell phone is now a reporter. You know, if you have a camera on your phone, so get rid of the flip phones, gang. If you have a camera on the phone, you're now a reporter, and you have all the means necessary in order to report on the news. We can't watch everything. David mentions Media Matters had 27 employees. Remember, Media Matters had 27 employees to basically watch Fox News and listen to Rush Limbaugh. We have me and 7 part-time employees to do NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, The Washington Post, The New York Times, The Chicago Tribune, The LA Times, and what is left of liberal talk radio, the 2 people who listen to Mike Malloy. So that means that we do need all your help. If you see something, don't assume that we saw it. You know, we have a tip box at Truth Revolt. It's in the upper right-hand corner. You can click there. You can email us direct with any tips that you have on the media. We've gotten some of our best material that way. The Steve Leisman thing was a tip that we got. It was somebody who actually tweeted at me and saw it on CNBC. And we immediately went and grabbed the tape and found out it was true and cut it and put it up. So everybody is now an activist. Everybody now has the ability to be an activist and make a difference in this fight. And you know, not only are we doing this at Truth Revolt, we have a great relationship with Breitbart because I'm still editor-at-large over there. So we can post our material there, and play it up, and we can get attention for virtually anything that the left media does wrong. So we now have the bullhorn. It's just a matter of what voice we want to go into the bullhorn. So that can be your voice. Just let us know and give us the information.
Thank you. The site is truthrevolt.org. That's where you find it. We have another site called discoverthenetworks.org, which is an encyclopedia of the left, which goes hand in hand with this. And as Ben was talking, I think one of the things that has always, again, it's the strength of the right, that the right is about individualism, but it's also a weakness. The left is about solidarity, and you don't find a lot of cooperation among conservative groups. But now, this network, we have Breitbart, Drudge. This is going to be very, very powerful over time. And you have to understand, what he's talking about is 6 weeks old. So we are at the beginning.
We're going to win. We will. We'll get there. We just have to be willing to punch back, and we now have the means to do it. So thank you.
All right. Thank you all.